And you will receive a copy of this webinar after the session, so that if you want to watch over it again, you can. And you'll receive the link via the email when we finish, along with a copy of the slides, which includes the references for today's presentation as well. Now, up in the corner there, we have Kate Lamont, who is the other director at Thrive, and she's going to be monitoring the chat function throughout the webinar. So if you've got questions, please do pop them into the chat box, and then we'll go through them at the end of the session as well. So, oops, sorry. Sorry, you're all popping up again. So before we start, a little bit about Thrive and about us. Our mission is to work with providers and organisations and people who work caring for older people. And our mission is to create the right conditions for older people to be able to thrive. And the way that we do that is through several different ways, through things like today's session. So a lot of training and education and mentoring of staff. We also assist with reviewing programs and services that you might provide. So things like your meal service, for example. And Kate is an OT, so she does reviews of the physical environment that we provide care in as well. Because our philosophy is that if you have the right conditions for everybody, so that includes the staff, you will be able to provide, you'll be able to promote everybody to be able to thrive and live their best lives. And that's not just the older people, it's the people working in that environment as well. Now today, I'm just going to introduce myself now. So my name is Kathy Kirby and I am a registered nurse and one of the directors at Thrive. As I mentioned, we have Kate Lamont, who is letting everybody in and monitoring our chat function. Kate is an OT, and between the two of us, we've got, or not both of us, I should say, have 20 years experience working in the health and aged care settings in a variety of different roles. We both still work as clinicians in our respective roles, and we both still have a very strong passion for older people as well. And today we're really excited to be joined by Kylie Walton, who is a dietitian at Food Solutions, Diet Consultants. So Kylie, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Kylie. I work for Food Solutions. We're a company that are dietitians and speech pathologists that specialise in aged care. So I was a late graduate for my second degree as a dietitian. So since it's been about 8 years that I've been working as a dietitian, and in that whole time really loving working in aged care. We do a lot with clinical work, but also looking at things like menus, processes, and the dining room experience in a lot of the aged care facilities that we service, as well as I also love to go and see residents out in the community that are in their own homes and support them as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kylie. So today, both of Kylie and I are going to be talking during this webinar, and we're going to give you an introduction to get you start thinking about the new food and nutrition standard that is going to be coming in next year. Most importantly, we're going to look at it as an opportunity for you, how you can impact on older people who you are providing care for. So we're going to be discussing as well the areas that you might find challenging, and Kylie's really going to focus on that, being the clinician out and about in aged care and the common things that she's seeing, and where you might want to start focusing your attention, when we're looking at this new standard. We're also going to give you some ideas about small changes that you can make to improve your residents' quality of life in the food and nutrition space as well. Now, for those of you probably are familiar with the current aged care quality and safety standards. So you'll know that there are 8 standards that are currently in place, and these were implemented in 2019. Now, food and nutrition itself is mostly included within Standard 4 and Standard 5 in some ways within the current aged care standards. But I'm sure that you'll all be aware as well that most commonly you would see it in Standard 6 as well, which is feedback and complaints. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the new updated standards that they're looking to introduce in July 2024 have actually taken food and nutrition out and made a standard on its own. So if you look at this image here, this is the proposed improved standards, I think they're called, and food and nutrition is a standalone standard, which is standard 6. As you can see here as well, each of the aged care standards, and this is within the current standards that we have, but in the new ones as well, there is an expectation standard. So this is outlining what the expectations are for your organisation or as providers for your to show what they're expecting you to provide for your residents that you care for. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the expectation for the new standard 6 that is going to be implemented. And there are 3 key statements, and I've highlighted in red the key words that we think that you should really focus on, okay, because it's a lot. It's been quite clear and explicit about what they're wanting to achieve out of this standard. So if we have a look at the expectations, they are that residents receive plenty of food and drinks that they enjoy, that food and drinks are appetizing, nutritious and safe, and that they meet the needs and preferences for that particular resident. And also that the dining experience itself is enjoyable and it includes a variety and it supports a sense of belonging. Something key within the new standards, if you're not aware, is that there is a big focus on supporting people living with dementia or cognitive impairment. So, and again, there'll be a link with the overview of the standards within this presentation, so you can have a look later if you haven't seen them. But supporting people living with dementia is intertwined into each of the standards. Okay, so our mealtime experience and the food and nutrition standard itself also includes that. So let's have a look at what the goals are with the new standard. So the goals are to ensure that older people in aged care have access to and receive nutritious food and positive dining experience. And this is important not just for preventing things such as malnutrition, okay? So for the clinicians who are in today's call, the importance of preventing malnutrition, and how it can negatively impact in a manner of ways with older people. But I think that we can all probably agree as well that food is often a huge part of people's lives. Therefore, a positive experience is key to a person having good quality of life. So the new standard also sets expectations around providers engaging with their residents in key areas such as choice. So in particular, this includes choice around meal times and the types of meals that they want to consume. They have an expectation that the types of meals are nutritious and appetizing. And this also includes your specialised texture modified diets, which I'm sure Kylie will also, touch on when she speaks a bit later as well. It's going to be an expectation that you have systems in place to support a resident to consume food and drink as often as they like. And Kylie's got a great example, which was like a light bulb moment for me when we were talking the other week around intermittent fasting, which, I'll let her cover off when she speaks. So why is the focus on food and nutrition? We all know how important food and nutrition is, and we're all busy and we all have a number of residents living with us, and we're all trying to accommodate as best we can. And it's really hard, when you're thinking, you might have 30 residents, you might have 120 residents. So how can you possibly accommodate for, all, what everybody wants in their mealtime? But if we go back to the why, then we'll understand more about why there is such a key focus on this area. So to explain a little bit more, as you age, people can lose their appetite. They might lose that because of the aging process. It might be related to changes that impact on their ability to eat. So, for example, a resident might have impaired swallowing, which requires them to have a specialised diet, or they might have changes to their taste and smell due to changes in the brain, or, they might just not have that feeling of hunger, due to things such as, like we were talking about before, dementia. But it's important to remember that nutrition itself is really important, because it's not just about the food that we eat, it's about what it does to support our body to function every day. And nutrition is really important for many reasons. So, you know, we're not going to go into a lot of detail, but, you know, for things such as wound healing, you know, nutrition is really important from that aspect. If we go and look at food itself, why is it important? Well, like we said before, you know, food is often associated with our culture and it's strongly associated with our quality of life as well. So, you know, we've heard of that saying, we should be eating to live, but often we're living to eat. And I'm one of those people. I'm a person who really enjoys going out and sharing meals with people. It's a social, it's a key part of my day. And if you think yourself, you know, how many times a day or how many times a week does food and drink pop into our heads? You know, I'm sure that I'm seeing a few head nods, you know, it's probably quite a few times. So imagine if you're in a facility and you have, you know, very structured meal times, very structured options, you know, and how would that impact on your quality of life? So it's about going back to that why, and why are we having a look at this and how can we do things a little bit better for the people that we're caring for? So what else do we know about food in aged care? Well, as we were talking about before, standard 6, feedback and complaints, you know, food and related topics are often, you know, up there as probably your main complaint. I work in a lot of facilities and I know Kylie does as well, and food always ranks quite highly. So the Commission was aware of this as well. It was also the cause of a number of complaints that make it to the Commission because people haven't had acts or haven't been happy with the approaches or the actions taken when they've made complaints about food at a local level. So because of this, the Commission appointed the Health Outcomes International to have a look at food-related complaints that were received by the Commission. And this was over 3 years, from December 18 to December 20. So a few years ago, but I think if you have a look at what the themes they've identified, you'll think that they're probably the same ones that you're still hearing or seeing today. And this was purely just for residential aged care. So there were 11 key themes that were identified, and we've got them listed over the next couple of slides. And again, this full report is in the references for you to have a look at as well. So there's probably nothing surprising here for any of you, but if we run down the list and we even just look at the top 4, you know, meal or food quality is the #1 complaint. The second was the quantity, frequency, and the key word here, again, highlighted in red, accessibility of food and drink. And then followed by the food service, and this included supported feeding. And again, if we're looking at, you know, your higher needs residents and including those people living with dementia, you know, how are we providing good supports to enable them to enjoy their mealtime experience and to receive the nutrition that they need? We've got, you know, choice and diversity, appropriate nutrition and preferences. And then over here, these are the last themes as well. Here as well, dining in the actual environment made it in the top 10. So that's really key, and that's something else as well that's included within the nutrition, the new food and nutrition standard. So again, that's a very broad overview of the food nutrition standard, and we've talked about the why it's come into place, and I think we can all agree that it is, you know, of importance. So now we're going to hear from Kylie. So as we spoke about, for those who were late joining, Kylie is a dietitian who works across many aged care facilities. So now we're going to talk about, you know, what are some of the key challenges that you see, Kylie, when you're out and about, and probably some of the things that you guys are already thinking in your head, well, how am I going to possibly address this, you know, with the food new standard? So Kylie, I'm going to hand over to you now. And why don't we start with, you know, what are some of the key challenges or the key themes that you're seeing when you're out in facilities in relating to food and nutrition itself?
Thanks, Kathy. So I think the main kind of overlying theme that I have is that really not asking the residents what they want. So there's often a lot of assumptions made, you know, things like, oh, that resident always wants a small meal, or that resident has porridge for breakfast. Just not asking and giving that sense of choice day to day. Things like they don't normally have seconds. You know, sometimes if a resident really enjoys a meal or enjoys a dessert, they do want a second, and that's a really nice, easy way to get that extra nutrition in. So it's just a matter of kind of going through the motion rather than seeing the resident as an individual who is going to be have a different experience with food day to day. When it comes to kind of how that happens, there's kind of, I often seem to very extreme things where we have some facilities that do beautiful, almost silver service style meals where, you know, the level of service is really great. Some residents don't feel comfortable with that. And then the other option is, you know, when it's very much just everything's kind of thrown in front of them, they get, you know, they get what they get. And I don't think a lot of residents love that either. We have to just keep that focus on, this is a resident's home, this is where they live, and we really want to make sure that we're providing them with a meal experience that they enjoy. And that varies greatly between a 90-year-old and a 60-year-old, which we've got all of those people in our aged care facilities, and their experience of food can be hugely different. The other thing that I see quite often is texture modified meals as a bit of an afterthought. You know, that's something that happens after, you know, we've done the meal planning. We're gonna, what have we got left that we can texture modify? And that means that there's often not a lot of choice or variety given to those on texture modified meals. Now, we already know that those that have texture modified meals are at higher risk of malnutrition as you know, as a baseline. So when we're not able to provide them with attractive meals that taste good, that causes bigger issues, and it lends us to kind of a bit of a vicious circle of weight loss and further deterioration in those residents' capacity to help themselves with meals and eating. Limiting access. So, you know, accessibility being one of those main complaints. So often what can happen, and it's sometimes because of safety concerns about cost. You know, if I put the fruit bowl out, we know that someone who's a bit of a kleptomaniac is going to fill up their walker with it, and that does happen a lot. But we've got to find ways around that so that the other residents within the facility aren't, you know, disadvantaged by that. And you mentioned before kind of the that intermittent fasting, and that's kind of that limiting access that I see in a lot of facilities, because we're trying to meet our mealtime commitments to our residents in a really short period of time, typically when the chef's on site. So we might be doing breakfast at 8 a.m. and then we might have lunch at 12 and then dinner at 5. And supper isn't always routinely given. And so we've got these residents that are kind of really fasting from 5:30 in the evening through to 8 in the morning, which is definitely not ideal from a nutrition point of view, let alone the complications that we have with diabetic residents, that kind of thing. So really making sure that there's opportunities for people to eat when they want to. And if that's outside of meal service, making sure that that's very accessible for them. Cultural, you know, we've got where we live in a very multicultural society, and sometimes we might have pockets of a particular cultural group in a certain area, and we need to make sure that their needs are being met as well. It's really hard to go, you know, live your life in eating certain types of food, then all of a sudden be transported into a world where you're expected to eat very differently. And that combined with, you know, any kind of cognitive changes can be really challenging and leads to, you know, a lot of unhappiness and unsettledness for residents that are kind of put into that situation. With menus, you know, there is a lot we can do to plan a menu to make sure that we're meeting a lot of these needs. And it's just a matter of doing a bit of planning, understanding what a kitchen workflow looks like. So, you know, if we are going to be doing a texture modified meal, like a puree meal and a soft and bite-sized, and we've got dementia residents that need finger foods, can we kind of start with the same base meal and work out how we can make that happen? So really planning that from the get-go. Nutritional supplements. So this is one of my, you know, big bugbears with, you know, as soon as someone starts losing weight, the number one thing that will happen is that they'll be put onto a nutritional supplement. Now, they can be absolutely fantastic, but it doesn't address the reason. So if that resident's losing weight because they've their teeth are bad and they're not chewing, then we might need to modify their meals. We might need to get their teeth fixed. We just need to look at that person as from a more holistic view and see how we can actually support them to access food and enjoy food without just relying on the nutritional supplements, because while they are great, they're not as good as food, and quality of life and all of those things can really be impacted even if weight is stable with nutritional supplements. And then my last point is really just around that mealtime experience. So, again, making sure that we've got a good staff culture about prioritising that mealtime experience for residents, because we can have the most beautiful food, we can have the best planned menu, but if it's served cold, if it's served in an environment that's uncomfortable for the residents, or they're not able to access the food because it's put on a tray outside of their reach, all of those things are really key to make sure that the food we are providing is being enjoyed and eaten as well as possible. So I think, that's, I guess, a bit of a snapshot about the negative stuff. But it also is a great way of then kind of going, okay, so if we know that, what can we do to kind of make changes on a systems and processes level to improve those things, because I think that's really, really possible, and I see that in my facilities quite often. So I'll hand back over to you, Kathy, and you can talk about some of those opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, and feel free to jump in again, Kylie. And guys, if you've got questions, pop them in the chat, and we will have time for questions at the end. But feel free to write them in the chat. But that's a great point, Kylie. It's an opportunity. It might be challenges that we're seeing out there, but everyone is seeing similar challenges. But with a challenge comes opportunity. And I guess the thing is that you just want to start with simple. Often we think, oh my gosh, there's something new coming in. I've got to overhaul the whole system, and it can be very overwhelming. But it's, if you start with small things, small changes bring new ideas and can have huge impacts as well. So some suggestions for you to have a look at. So like Kylie was saying, the environment is often overlooked. And I know Kate will agree with this as well. And we've all been around to lots of facilities, and it's surprising how many times you'll go in and you'll be like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. This is so noisy or so cluttered, or and because you work in the environment for, day in, day out, and possibly for years, you don't notice it anymore. But when you're a new person coming in and you can look at that environment from different eyes. So, my suggestion to you is you go into your environment, or you go to a different facility, and you imagine that you're a new resident coming in. It's your first time walking in, and you're coming to go to your first meal. Sit down as if you were that resident, and experience it. Use all of your senses, because you'll be surprised the things that you notice that you might not have noticed before. So sit at that table. Is it noisy? Is it enticing? Is the layout of the table enticing? Is this somewhere that you would want to sit day in, day out for the rest of your life and consume all of your meals? If you want to go all out, put on a pair of sunglasses, and imagine that you've got vision impairment, or put some headphones on, and, imagine that you've got hearing impairment as well, and you're a bit disorientated, and live that experience. And then sit down and, order your meals as well. What's that experience like when someone comes and asks you what you want to eat? How do you feel in that moment? And, I've been at facilities that are still requiring their residents to order meals 6 weeks out. So, and I'm seeing some head nods here. And again, this is an issue where you might look and say, oh my God, how are we ever going to fix that, right? But like Kylie was saying, what are the other options that you've got available? What are other meal options that you have? Because I looked up the date and it was like January the 17th, 2024. If you ask me what I want to eat for lunch on January that date, then I'd be looking at you like, what are you talking about? So while we might not be able to fix that issue straight away, what are some of the things that you can put in place in the meantime to give choice to your residents? Instead of just saying it's all too hard, let's look at different ways to work around that system. When we're talking about the meal itself, sit down and have a meal. Have a texture modified meal. If you were looking at that and you received that meal day in, day out, is that something that you would want to be eating, or does it turn your stomach? Do you think, oh my God, I wouldn't want to eat this every day? If it's it might be a different meal, but does it look the same? Your fish and veg and your chicken and veg look exactly the same for your texture modified. How can you enhance that, what's the word? Aesthetics of it. How is it presented? And again, like Kylie was saying, I love that example about intermittent fasting. If dinner's at 5 because your kitchen staff need to be out at 6, you know, what have you got available after hours? And again, that comes back to choice. Maybe I don't want to eat at 5 o'clock. Maybe I normally eat at 8 o'clock. Well, that's okay. So how can we support you to have your dinner at 8 o'clock? And you know, how do we give you options to eat at that time as well? And not just snack foods, you know, meals. What have we got options for meals? There's lots of frozen meals out there now. It doesn't have to be, you know, sandwiches and yogurts that, you know, those traditional, and not forgetting the texture modified diet as well. And again, how do you support people living with dementia? Because it's not just about finger foods, okay? So have a look at your staff, because I see this often as well, and how are they supporting people living with dementia to eat their meal? Are they sitting there trying to shove the meal in quickly and then the person's saying no, 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 and then that's it and they stop eating because, you know, the whole experience has put them off? Or, you know, like what options do you have available? Do you need to do some education with your staff? Or, you know, what other options do you have available for your people living with dementia? Yeah, how do you offer different options for food and drinks? So, you know, like we were saying, 6 weeks ahead of time, you don't know what you're going to want for lunch or for dinner. So, you know, what can you put in place now to bypass that system that is a bigger, larger problem that's probably going to take you a bit longer to sort out? So some of the take-home messages from today, okay, so we know about the new standards coming in, you know, you'll have access to all of those materials, but it's about starting small and thinking big, you know, not getting overwhelmed by the challenges, thinking about the opportunities and going back to the why. Why is food and nutrition important? Well, if I was going into a facility, nutrition is important from one aspect of, you know, health, you know, you know, wound healing and all of that aspect of it, that's one side, but the quality of life is huge. So putting yourself in your resident's position and going, why, you know, what would I want to have for myself? What would I want to have for my family members? Why is this so important? It's not just about the food. It's you know, it's about, you know, the quality of life, and the cultural perspective is really important. Like Kylie was saying, nutritional supplements are helpful, but it's not the first step. We shouldn't be using that as the first step for weight loss. Why are people not eating? You know, why are people becoming malnourished? You know, and having a look at the broader picture rather than just putting slapping a solution on being the supplements. And live the experience. I cannot emphasize enough the difference it makes when you actually put yourself in the resident's shoes. Whether you've worked somewhere for a month, whether you've worked there for 20 years. You know, follow those steps and go in as if you are a brand new resident with cognitive impairment and some hearing and vision impairment, because they're the people that we're caring for, and go in and experience the mealtime yourself and go all out. And then you will see where your challenges are, and then you will come up with solutions as well, because it'll give you a different perspective. Now we are going to have some time for questions if anyone wants to jump in, and just raise your hand or type in the chat. But just quickly to give you talk about our course that we're running next year. So we are very excited to be running a Reimagining the Mealtime Experience course starting in February next year. It's a 12-week program, and it includes experts such as Kylie and Kate and myself, and we also have a support services manager who are going to be presenting on different topics relating to the mealtime experience, but how you can look at this, you know, that broader system, and how you can make improvements to meet the new food and nutrition standard. It's open for anybody who works caring for older people, you know, in the aged care setting. So we have got chefs, we've got clinicians, we've got managers, but it takes you through, you know, the importance of nutrition, you know, how you can implement change from somebody who's actually done it as well. And then Kate will talk about the environment and how to make the improvements, and lots of other topics in there. We'll send you, excuse me, we'll send you a copy of the flyer at the end. And if you're interested, please feel free to get in touch. While I throw out to see if anyone has any questions, we do have a QR code here. We would love some feedback about today's webinar, and you know, we value people's opinion. But does anybody have any questions that they want to ask myself or Kate or Kylie? Okay. We've got 2 slides. Oh, sorry, Dora.
Probably not a question, but a statement. I think going in and having that resident experience is really going to make a difference. Sitting at that table, and yeah, that was a really good example that I'm going to try. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dora. It has a huge. It does challenge your thinking when you do it, particularly when you're presented with a meal as a meal is presented to a resident. And this is often, if you're a service that still serves meals on trays, which I do see around, there's nothing like getting changes implemented when you get a senior staff member come and you plonk them at a resident table and you plonk a tray in front of them with texture modified food. It's visual and, living the experience can help people understand the need for change. And it does help you when you've lived the experience yourself. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? We've just got a slide here with Kylie's services from Food Solutions, and we'd like to take this time to say thank you to Kylie for coming along and presenting today. It's really great to hear, the key insights from clinicians working in the space. One thing at Thrive is we are clinicians and we do understand the current state of play. And that's what we pride ourselves on, is coming with opportunities and solutions rather than just, what you need to do to meet the regulations. Let's look at what the issues are and let's be practical in our solutions. That's our passion and our focus. So thank you, Kylie, for your contribution. And Kylie will be presenting in the course, so we're very excited about that.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And obviously we have services available as well, and we will send you an email with, excuse me, with a link from the recording from today's session, as well as a copy of the slides with the resources that we spoke about, so you can have a look at those. But thank you, everybody. 2 minutes late, but we know you're busy, and if there are no questions, we will let you go.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.